Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the first episode of Marvel Monday. Yay! This is exciting. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Season 1, Episode 1 of Netflix Marvel Daredevil. So, just a spoiler warning, I'm going to give a summary of the episode, and it'll give away plot points and characters and things like that. So if you haven't seen the first episode of Daredevil, spoiler warning. Let's get into it. So first of all, just a brief summary of the series. The series focuses on Matt Murdock, a blind lawyer who maintains a secret life as a vigilante at night wearing a black suit and mask. During the day, he and his best friend Foggy Nelson run their own law firm and take on cases for people they feel are truly innocent. So let's get into the summary of the episode. The episode starts with explaining how Matt got blinded. He pushed an elderly man out of the way of a truck carrying hazardous chemicals but ended up getting hit himself. The chemicals essentially destroyed his vision, but also enhanced his other senses tenfold. It cuts to an adult Matt in confessional, reminiscing about his dad and then asking for forgiveness about an act he's about to commit. Then it switches to some girls about to be victims of human trafficking. A man in a black suit and mask shows up and disables all of the criminals. Back at their law firm, Nelson and Murdoch, Matt and Foggy get their first client, a woman named Karen Page who is accused of murdering her coworker Danielle Fisher in her apartment. After Karen gets attacked in her jail cell by someone who was blackmailed by a guy named James Wesley, Matt and Foggy manage to release Karen from the city jail. She then confesses that the reason why she got wrapped up into this mess was because at her work, Union Allied Construction, she accidentally received an email with a pension file attachment, which Karen thought was a record book for criminal activity. She asked to meet with Danielle about it, who worked in the company's legal department, to figure out what to do next. After her and Danielle met up, she said that she blacked out and came to with a bloody knife in her hands and Danielle dead on the floor. Matt and Foggy decide to take it upon themselves to keep Karen safe after she's attacked in her own jail cell, so she ends up staying at Matt's apartment. Matt explains his theory about the case to Karen. He says it's odd how no charges have been pressed against her and how she wasn't killed immediately like Danielle Fisher was. It seems like she has something that the criminals involved with this Union Allied scandal want. Karen denies the accusation, but Matt, with his super senses, detects the lie. There's a cut to a group of organized crime leaders on a rooftop, such as finance expert Leland Alsley, two Russian mobsters Anatoly and Vladimir Ranskahov, an older Chinese drug manufacturer named Madame Gao, Yakuza fighter Nabu Yoshioka, and finally James Wesley, second in command and representative of a mysterious mob boss, whose name Wesley is adamant is not spoken out loud. They discuss various business matters like why the Russians aren't paying Wesley's employers as much, and Alsley's concern with the recent breach at Union Allied. After the Russians explain that their shipment of human trafficking victims was halted by a man in a black suit and mask, Wesley becomes intrigued with the vigilante and says they need to focus on finding out who he is. Karen decides to sneak out in the middle of the night back to her apartment, where she retrieves a flash drive with a copy of the pension file. In the apartment, an assassin is waiting for Karen and attacks her. Suddenly, a man in a black suit and mask appears, knocks the assassin out, and saves Karen. Keeping his secret identity intact, Matt tells Karen that they'll tell everyone about what happened, not just the authorities. Matt then throws the assassin, bound and with the thumb drive duct taped to his hands, on the steps of the New York Bulletin newspaper. After a few days, the Union Allied scandal makes front page news. Wesley, reading the story, converses with his employer over the phone about the situation and assures him that this incident won't be linked to their business. He goes on to explain that all of the loose ends were taken care of. The assassin, the man who attacked Karen in her holding cell, and Karen's boss's deaths were all made to look like suicides, and Leland had moved all of the dirty money out of Union Allied. Wesley's employer's name is not revealed at the end of the episode. Back at Nelson and Murdoch Law, Karen makes a celebratory meal in honor of their success and says in exchange for their services, she could be their secretary. The episode ends with Matt hearing a boy being kidnapped by the Russians, then goes off to save him. Okay, so now that we got the summary out of the way, let's get into the analysis. I do have to say, just a disclaimer, that all these thoughts are my own. Feel free to think differently. There's no right or wrong answer with these types of things. One of the main symbolisms I think that carries not just through this episode but throughout the whole entire series is Matt being blind. Because if you think about the Lady Justice logo, she's blind, facing a scale where a sword is at her side. This means that she's unbiased and emotionally detached from the situation, looking purely at the facts. It's paradoxical that Matt has decided not to rely purely on the justice system, but also through his own hands, quite literally. Matt mentions in the beginning of the episode that his father, a boxer, would unleash the devil on his opponents and that he didn't understand at the time, but he did now. This means that Matt's emotionally charged, emotionally biased towards the situations that occur. Of course, he tries to do the right thing and goes through the legal system. He is a lawyer after all. But him letting the devil out shows his dark and violent interior that he wants to be released. Another thing I found interesting was Foggy's nickname. Foggy. His real name is Franklin, so Foggy just seems kind of like a weird nickname to have. I haven't read the Daredevil comics, so I don't know the story behind that. But I think, just not knowing anything else about the character, I think it could represent the gray area of the law or the world in general. So, which is also a paradox because Foggy is the one who wants to do things by the book and not really bend the rules and look for loopholes and things like that. Whereas Matt wants to do things his way, insisting everything is a gray area. He beats people up because they break the law. Of course, it's over serious crimes like trafficking, weapon dealing, and drug smuggling, blackmailing, etc. But still violently assaulting people, which is a crime. Which leads me to the Robin Hood trope, which I think this show explores pretty well and in an interesting context. One of the main questions of the Robin Hood trope that I feel is, do the ends justify the means? So, if you do bad things in order to achieve a good goal, do the bad things that you do in order to get that goal, are they justified? So that also leads into the gray and foggy aspects, like I talked earlier, with everything being a gray area. So if you think about Robin Hood, he stole from the rich to feed the poor. With the black and white view, with no exceptions or justifications as to why someone would break the law, stealing and assault are illegal regardless of the circumstances. If you look at it through the foggy or gray lens, what Robin Hood is doing is right because he's helping those who can't help themselves. If you follow this reasoning as well, then what Matt is doing is the right thing. Or you could look at it through an even foggier perspective and say that Robin Hood is doing the right thing because his actions cause no inherent harm, but Matt isn't doing the right thing because he's inflicting damage on these people. Robin Hood steals from people who can easily replace the funds and items that he stole. But with Matt, he goes and attacks people. He causes physical damage, some long-term things like broken bones or brain damage, or possibly long-term things like people can't quite move their shoulder all the way, or their head's kind of messed up, or they have wires in their jaw so they can't talk, things like that. So if you look at it through that way, then Robin Hood is doing the right thing. So I lost about half of my footage from yesterday, so a lot of this is just going to be some voiceover stuff. So I left off where we were going to talk about the costumes for the show. It's just the first episode, so there's not a lot to pick apart here, but I think the main thing that's noticeable is Matt's costume, because it's all black, and black is typically associated with evil and darkness, as well as something the villains in a story would wear, not the hero. And that could represent the devil aspect of him, and later on you learn the explanation of why he earns the nickname Daredevil. You could probably see the dare part now, but so far the most prominent is the devil portion. Another thing that carries out throughout the whole series is the sensation of touch. Since Matt can't see anything, one of his primary senses is touch. And there's a line that carries out through this episode as well as the next episode, but we'll talk about that more next week, is touch my face or feel my face, which is what Jack says to Matt. So it's mentioned for the first time in this episode after Jack returns home from a fight, and he needs Matt to help stitch him up, and Matt can't see, obviously, so then he has to feel for where the wounds are and what he needs to do. And then later on, towards the end of the episode, that flows into some type of mantra that he uses to get through the final fight at the end. Another thing that is very important throughout this whole series is sight and sound. So the intro for this series, I think, is one of the most beautiful ones ever. It just with the idea of the dripping blood over the hidden objects to reveal the New York City and the church where Matt attended where he was young, and then ending with the famous Daredevil suit. I think it's just really cool because blood is obviously very closely related with violence and gore. So I think that right away, if you just watch the intro, you know just kind of what the show is about and how it's going to be and the overall tone and things like that. And some of the cinematography in this episode are amazing too. So in particular, in this episode, the rain fight scene towards the end, after Karen shows up at her apartment to get the thumb drive, and then the assassin, his name is Rance, he attacks her and then Matt shows up to save her. That whole entire fight scene is really cool because throughout the whole episode they make use of kind of brighter, warmer toned lighting, but then with the rain scene they use dark, cool toned lighting, so I thought that was interesting. Another thing that is really cool with the cinematography is that when Matt uses his super hearing, so the edges get all blurry and the sound then becomes amplified, so then you can hear clearly what Matt is hearing. I think that is really cool because then you know right away, oh, this is what Matt's hearing and this is more than what the average person would be able to register. That also ties into the first fight scene because it also starts off the same way. The sight of everything, the video's kind of blurry and out of perspective and things like that. But then as it carries on, when the fight scene starts, the only thing that you can hear is his heartbeat, and it's just slow and steady, and then the guy attacks him, and then bam, the fight starts. Since the episode uses this technique when Jack showed up at the very beginning of the episode, this could be an auditory way to connect Matt and Jack. In his confessional at the beginning, Matt quotes his grandmother saying, "Be careful with those Murdoch boys, they got the devil in them," and then using the idea of the devil being inside Jack while he was in the ring. That could be another very strong connection. Matt does eventually take up the name Daredevil, and he does a lot of his work in Hell's Kitchen, so it certainly does make more sense to continue that theme throughout the series. A few times through the episode when Matt's not wearing his glasses, you can see him start to get emotional as he goes through his speech about how his dad used to fight and how when he was a kid he didn't understand why his dad did what he did, but now as an adult he understood. After Matt's done, he rolls his eyes and then puts his glasses on, and right after he puts the glasses on, there's a facade that appears at the cold, distant, and confident lawyer. But when he's not wearing the glasses, you see the broken man he is. Another visual aspect that they use a lot in the show is the out of focus. I kind of mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Matt's super hearing. Another thing that they use this for is close-ups with the blurring around the edges, so that way the audience can focus on the actor or actress in frame solely on them without getting distracted by anything else. And I love it when you can see the actor or actress's micro expressions while they're in character, like the tiny twitches of the eyes, the subtle smiles, and the eyes saying one thing while the face says another. I think that's a very interesting thing to analyze and pick apart. Another important thing throughout this whole entire episode is sound. So an interesting point is that in the very beginning of the episode, they put an emphasis on sight. So the picture is completely in focus, but the sound is muffled, but it's just enough for you to hear what's going on, but not enough to hear the details. And they also make use of combining the blurred and emphasized aspects throughout the whole entire series. Like with the edges of the screen blurred, camera focusing on one thing, and the audio getting louder in order for you to hear something important. And so the beginning of the series starts off with the opposite, with the muffled sound and very clear picture. I feel like it is significant, I just can't put my finger on why. And while we're on the subject of the very beginning, within the first 2 minutes, in fact, you instantly see how good Matt's heart is. Even at 9 years old, which was his age during the accident, he was willing to put himself in danger to save someone, even if it was a complete stranger. Also, the actor who played young Matt did an excellent job. I'd get chills every time I hear him scream, "I can't see, I can't see." I've seen this episode about 5 or 6 times, and every time I watch that beginning scene, I get chills. That actor did such a good job. I also think it's really sad that the last thing Matt was able to see clearly was his dad scared. And as a kid, you never want to see your parents scared. You think your parents aren't scared of anything and they're always in control. So for the last thing Matt to see was his dad, the boxer, the battling Jack Murdoch, to be scared is just incredibly sad to me. I can't really put my finger on why, but it just makes me feel sad. So final thoughts on the episode. I like the show a lot because the characterization is really good. So since this is the first episode, we get to meet a lot of the characters that are going to be in the series, and you get a sense of the characters right away. Like, they instantly feel like real people, someone you would bump into on the street or in the grocery store. And there's a wide variety of them too. Everyone doesn't really have the same personality. So like Matt is kind of distant and reserved. Foggy is wild and charismatic. Karen is strong and curious. Sergeant Brett Mahoney is a man of his word, and he's very sarcastic and dry. Jack is very rough around the edges, but he's not afraid to show emotion. And it's also just the little things that they carry out. Some of my favorite things that they do in this episode in particular is the voice readout system that Matt has on his phone. It serves as a reminder or as a learning tool that Matt can't read on like a screen or a book like a normal person can. Even though he has these powers, he can't see finite details like that. So with the voice readout, I just thought it was an interesting touch. And then he also has a smartphone, which has the touch screen, so it takes a bit for him to answer Foggy's call in the very beginning because there's no change in texture for him to be able to figure out where he needs to swipe and things like that. And then going on with the phone call with Foggy, when you first meet him, he mentions that he's going to go bribe Sergeant Brett Mahoney's mom with cigars, and he goes, I'm going to go bribe a cop. And Matt just kind of goes fed up, and he goes, Foggy. And Foggy goes, sorry, NSA, if you're listening. And so nowadays, in 2018, when I'm recording this, it's kind of funny. But then if you take the fact that this season came out in 2015 into consideration, this was about a year after the whole Snowden incident, which, fun fact, came out just after Captain America Winter Soldier. So at this time, the 2014-2015, everyone was very concerned about privacy, especially with technology and things like that, because there was people were saying that the government was listening to everything that we were saying. So putting that into account, I just thought it was interesting that they threw that little joke in there. And it could also serve as a reminder in the future if we watch this show about like 10 or 15 years from now or whatever. We're not going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that we thought the NSA was spying on all of us, and they just listened to everything, and blah, 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 blah. We're not going to remember that right away, but then it'll be funny to have that little line, oh, sorry, NSA, if you're listening. So that's just sort of an interesting, nice little reminder for those of us who might be able to watch this in the future. Be like, oh yeah, that was a concern back then. Another thing is that Matt and Foggy's bantering is just pure gold. Like, everything they just bicker about is so funny. I just love the both of them together. And another one of my favorite parts is that the action scenes, they're pretty prevalent in this series. Matt is a superhero after all, so he can do more things than the average person can, but not a whole lot. The fight scenes are interesting because Matt is kind of a normal person. Physically, he doesn't have super strength or super stamina or anything. So he can't do super crazy fight moves or anything like Captain America or Black Widow or Winter Soldier can do. So all the fights feel pretty realistic and gritty and dark and things like that. He does do a lot of crazy flips though, which I don't get those flips like at all. 'Cause when he does them, he'll like flip in the air and kick someone in the head and then slam himself onto the ground while the other person falls. It's just kind of like, you hurt yourself just as much as the other person. So where's the benefit in that? There's none. He's just kind of an idiot sometimes. Like, he's a lawyer, so he's smart. But then he does something like that and you're just kind of like questioning his intelligence sometimes. The rain scene, I've mentioned it a few times before, it's a pretty good fight scene. So the lighting is good, the use of the slow motion or the muffled audio or the blurry focus, it's just like, all of it just kind of put together is a really good scene. Another thing I want to talk about is the writing. The writing is also really good. The part where we meet James Wesley at the park when he's blackmailing Mr. Farnham, it's a really weird thing because he's talking about, he's threatening Mr. Farnham's daughter or whatever. So he's like, what is it with college girls and Monet t-shirts? So does it reflect the spontaneity of the turning point in their lives or whatever, like this little mini rant about it or whatever. And then he goes, just deadpan, totally serious and sinister, maybe they just like the color blue. It's just so weird to me. I don't get any type of symbolism behind that. It's just so weird. It's such a random line to say so dark. What's even funnier is that he's wearing a blue tie. I just think it's kind of ironic. It's just so weird and kind of random. I know you're not supposed to really like the villains, but I like Wesley a lot. Wesley is one of my favorite characters in the series, actually. Foggy and Wesley are my favorite characters in this whole entire series. I love both of them so much. They're amazing. I love both of them. Like, Foggy is just charming, he's funny, he's sweet, he's charismatic. Wesley's very dry and loyal, and just like the way he talks is very intriguing. Almost reminds me kind of like Loki, but not at the same time. There's a difference there. It's like Loki's voice sounds more real. Wesley's voice, it sounds more like he's definitely planned out everything he's gonna say. He has a response for everything the other person is gonna say. You could just tell by the way he talks. But for some reason, that's just kind of like intriguing to me. And plus, his personality in general is just like him a lot. And a lot of the quotes here are in the series are also really, really good. Like, thoughtful, profound, inspirational quotes. So I'm gonna give you some of my favorites. Mini assignment, I'm gonna give you guys some of my favorite quotes from this episode, and I want you guys to tell me in the comments below what you think they mean and what they tie into, if you like them, if you don't like them, and tell me your favorite quotes and why. Number 1. When he was outmatched, my dad's strategy was to let them hit him until they broke their hands. He never got knocked out, my dad. Knocked down, sure, but always got back up. Number 2. Whenever there's a stunning woman with questionable character in the room, Matt Murdock's gonna find her and Foggy Nelson is gonna suffer. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about those quotes and tell me your favorite quotes and why you like them. Another thing I liked was the reference to the Battle of New York when Matt and Foggy are touring their office space. And the real estate agent calls it the incident. Oh, that was just kind of funny because it reminds you that, oh, this is the same world as the Avengers. Like Tony Stark, Spider-Man, Captain America, all of that. Same world, same city. It also makes it feel more realistic because, like I said earlier, this show came out in 2015. And since the Avengers movie came out in 2012, there's about 3 years between them. So it does seem realistic with the city, the size of New York, and the size of the devastation that the Battle of New York caused. It does seem pretty realistic that it would take more than 3 years for a city to completely recover from something of that magnitude. Overall, I enjoy the show. If I were to give it a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, I would give it a 9. The reason why I would give it a 9 is that I feel like some scenes in this episode don't belong. They don't do anything to progress the plot or, advance the characters or do anything to help the show out at all. I feel like they're just there because the writers could put them in there. The show has a mature rating on Netflix, which is equivalent to a rated R movie. So I feel like they can just put those scenes in there because it's mature and they have the ability to. There's no point in them. That's just kind of annoying. It happens with some of the other episodes throughout the series too. So be sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, type a comment, and hit that bell notification that way you get notified the moment we post a video. Bye guys, see you around. She accidentally and asking for forgiveness for an act he's about to commit. Reminiscing about his dad and then asking forgiveness for an act he's about to commit. Robin Hood steals from people who can easily replace what the Robin Hood steals from people who can easily replace the funds and subscribe to our channel, like, comment, and So be sure to subscribe to our channel, tap the like button, someone who's blackmailed by a guy named James Wesley, by someone named was to let them hit him until they broke their hands. Number 1.